Lieutenant Sarah Martinez wasn't like most pilots at Naval Air Station Oceana. While others shared flying stories over drinks, she spent her time studying manuals and running through emergency drills in the simulator. By 28, she'd flown over 2,000 hours. Though few knew about her combat training or how well she handled pressure. Her father, a Mexican immigrant, fixed fighter jets. Her mother, a Navy nurse, treated wounded soldiers. Sarah grew up on bases, learning to speak quietly but walk with confidence. She watched her dad repair planes and heard her mom's stories about saving lives. These moments taught her that true courage rarely comes with applause. At the Naval Academy, Sarah faced doubt at every turn. Some instructors questioned whether women should fly combat missions. Classmates sometimes saw her as different rather than capable. Her response? Work harder than anyone else. Show up earlier, stay later, perfect every move. Her instructors noticed something special. She stayed calm when others panicked, and she made quick decisions that saved aircraft and lives. After graduating, Sarah got assigned to support missions instead of frontline combat. It bothered her, knowing she could do more, but she never complained. She grabbed every chance to learn, signing up for extra training and studying tactics in her free time. Her commander often asked her to teach newer pilots because she was patient and knew flight operations inside and out. The base hosted Navy SEALs for training, and Sarah watched them from afar. She saw how they operated as one unit, planned every detail, and maintained their gear with intense focus. These observations shaped how she flew, more careful, more thorough in her preparations. The ground crew loved working with Sarah. She understood aircraft better than most pilots. She'd spend time with mechanics, learning about engines and discussing ways to make planes run better. This knowledge made her sharper in the cockpit and helped her know exactly what her aircraft could handle when things got rough. On quiet nights, Sarah walked the flight line, checking planes and wondering about her future. Would she ever prove herself in real combat, or would she spend her career in the background? She'd heard about women breaking barriers in other military branches and hoped the Navy would give her that chance too. Her life stayed simple and focused. She kept a small apartment with aviation books and model planes from her childhood. She wrote her parents regularly. They were proud but worried. Sarah rarely mentioned the discrimination or extra obstacles she faced as a woman in this world. She let her flying do the talking. The morning that changed everything started normally. Sarah ran before dawn, then checked the day's flight schedule. She noticed SEAL teams training but didn't think much of it. Her mission looked routine and boring. As she prepped her aircraft, she had no clue that in hours, she'd face a test of everything she'd learned. Her quiet skill was about to be challenged in ways that would shock everyone who thought they knew her limits. The emergency alarm screamed through the peaceful morning. Sarah was checking her plane when the announcement blasted through speakers, calling everyone to the main briefing room. The commanding officer's voice carried an urgency she'd never heard. Her heart raced as she secured her aircraft and ran toward headquarters. Captain James Hawk Morrison, the base's top SEAL leader, stood at the front as the room filled quickly. His face showed strain, his hands shaking slightly as he organized classified papers. Around him, sailors, Marines, and aviators filed in, their chatter fading as they sensed something serious. The briefing opened with a satellite photo on the big screen. It showed remote mountains, where forests met rocky cliffs and narrow valleys. Red marks pointed to a downed helicopter hidden among trees, debris scattered in a small clearing. Morrison's voice stayed steady but emotional, as he explained that a Navy helicopter carrying combat engineers had crashed during a supply run in hostile territory. 4 crew members were alive but trapped 60 miles behind enemy lines. The crash site was surrounded by insurgents, actively hunting for survivors. Traditional rescue choppers couldn't reach them without getting shot down. The terrain was too dangerous for ground teams to reach them fast enough. Time was running out before the survivors would be captured or die from their wounds. Sarah listened closely as Morrison described the obstacles facing any rescue. The crash site sat in a narrow valley surrounded by high ridges, where enemies had placed anti-aircraft guns. Regular rescue aircraft were too big and too slow to navigate safely, and they'd be spotted long before reaching the survivors. Weather was getting worse. Low clouds and strong winds made flying conditions treacherous. Morrison paused and looked straight at the crowd. His next words burned into Sarah's memory forever. This mission needs a pilot with rare abilities. Someone who can fly a small, nimble aircraft at very low height through enemy land. The pilot must navigate dangerous mountains while staying hidden, find the crash site, and work with our rescue team on the ground." The room went silent as Morrison continued. The mission would use a modified spy plane stripped down to cut weight and boost agility. The pilot would fly below radar using natural cover to avoid detection, while keeping radio contact with both the rescue team and trapped survivors. Success needed more than great flying skills. It required deep knowledge of combat tactics and emergency procedures. Sarah's heart pounded as she understood what Morrison described. This was exactly the high-stakes, technically demanding mission she'd trained for her whole career. She knew the aircraft systems required, she'd studied the tactical approaches needed, and she had the calm mindset to pull off such a dangerous operation under extreme pressure. Around her, other pilots shifted uncomfortably. Many had more flight hours, some had combat experience, but she sensed their hesitation to volunteer for such a risky job. The technical demands of flying at extremely low heights through mountains while dodging enemy detection went beyond what most pilots had tried, even in training. Morrison's eyes swept the room as he prepared to ask the critical question. Sarah felt her heart hammering as she thought about what she was considering. Volunteering meant risking her life, but it also meant finally getting the chance to prove she belonged in combat. More importantly, it meant possibly saving 4 people who needed someone to bring them home. The captain's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "I need to know right now if there's a combat pilot here who has the skill and guts to attempt this rescue." His words hung in the air as everyone understood that someone's answer would decide whether the trapped survivors had any real chance of coming home alive. Sarah took a deep breath and slowly stood up. The silence became crushing as every head turned toward her. People stared at her small frame, questioning whether she could handle such a dangerous mission. Captain Morrison looked surprised but immediately interested, recognizing her from previous operations where her precision had earned respect among Special Operations Forces. Colonel Henderson, the base commander, spoke first. "Lieutenant Martinez, are you sure you understand what this involves?" His question carried concern and doubt, reflecting what many felt about whether a young female pilot should be trusted with such a critical operation. Sarah heard whispered conversations around her as others questioned her experience. Her voice came steady and confident. "Sir, I have over 2,000 hours flying low-altitude reconnaissance aircraft. I've finished advanced combat courses and specialized training in hostile territory navigation. I understand the dangers and believe I have the skills to complete this mission." Her words were measured and professional, but everyone sensed the determination behind them. Captain Morrison studied her carefully, his experienced eyes judging not just her words but how she carried herself. He'd worked with many pilots and developed a sense for who had the mental strength for dangerous operations. Something about Sarah's quiet confidence impressed him, though he'd never worked with her directly before. "Lieutenant, this isn't practice," Morrison said seriously. "You'll fly alone into territory controlled by hostile forces, who've already shown they can shoot down aircraft. Weather conditions are barely acceptable, and you'll navigate mountain terrain that's challenged even our most experienced pilots. Are you absolutely sure you're ready for this?" Sarah nodded without pause. "Captain, those 4 crew members are counting on someone to bring them home. I've studied maps of that region, and I understand the flight characteristics you're describing. I know I can do that." Her confidence wasn't arrogant or reckless, but the quiet certainty of someone who'd spent years preparing for exactly this challenge. The room erupted in quiet debates as officers discussed whether to select Sarah. Some argued her lack of real combat experience made her a bad choice. Others pointed out that her technical skills and calm nature might be exactly what the situation needed. Major Thompson, a senior pilot, offered to take the mission instead, citing his additional hours and combat background. Morrison raised his hand to quiet the discussions. "I need to decide quickly, and I'm basing it on who I think has the best shot at completing this successfully." He turned back to Sarah, his face serious. "Lieutenant Martinez, explain exactly how you'd approach this operation. Walk me through your thinking." Sarah moved to the front and studied the satellite images on the big screen. She traced possible flight paths with her finger, spotting natural features that could hide her from enemy eyes. Her analysis was thorough and organized, showing deep understanding of both flying principles and tactical thinking that impressed even the most doubtful officers. "I'd approach from the northwest using this ridge to hide my arrival," she explained, pointing to specific spots on the map. "The winds will actually help with fuel, and this route avoids the known anti-aircraft positions intelligence has found. Once I reach this valley, I can use tree cover to stay hidden while I locate the exact crash site and talk to the survivors." Morrison nodded approvingly as Sarah continued. She covered potential problems, emergency steps, and backup plans with the care of someone who truly thought through every part of the operation. Her knowledge of aircraft systems and limits was clearly deep, and her grasp of combat tactics was sharper than many officers expected. The key is staying extremely low while carefully managing speed through the mountain passes, Sarah continued. I've flown similar terrain in training, and I know how to use air currents and heat to maximize fuel while minimizing exposure time. The modified spy plane should have exactly the performance needed for this type of work. As Sarah finished her tactical review, Morrison exchanged looks with Colonel Henderson and other senior officers. Their faces shifted from doubt to respect as they realized her approach was both smart and workable. She'd shown not just flying ability but also the strategic thinking needed to succeed in such a complex operation. Morrison's decision came swift and firm. Lieutenant Martinez, the mission is yours. We launch in 2 hours. The 2 hours before takeoff flew by in a blur of intense preparation and final checks. Sarah worked closely with the ground crew to make sure every part of the modified spy plane functioned perfectly. The aircraft had been stripped of unnecessary equipment to reduce weight and boost fuel efficiency, while special navigation and communication gear had been added to support the rescue. Every detail mattered because there'd be no chance for fixes once she entered hostile territory. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, the base's top mechanic, personally oversaw the inspection. He'd worked with Sarah many times and trusted her technical knowledge and attention to detail. Together, they reviewed engine data, fuel calculations, and emergency equipment lists. Rodriguez shared his worries about the aircraft's modified setup, but also expressed faith in Sarah's ability to handle any mechanical problems during the mission. The intelligence briefing gave more details about enemy locations and recent activity in the target area. Sarah studied photos and listened carefully to radio intercepts, revealing enemy patrol patterns and communication frequencies. She memorized where anti-aircraft weapons were positioned and identified safe paths where terrain would hide her from ground observers. Captain Morrison joined Sarah for a final tactical review, sharing insights from his vast experience with rescue operations in hostile territory. He explained the ground team's planned approach to the crash site and reviewed communication protocols that would coordinate their work with her aerial search. Morrison stressed the importance of radio discipline and using coded language to prevent enemies from hearing their communication. Weather reports showed barely acceptable flying conditions, with low clouds, gusty winds, and possible afternoon storms in the target area. Sarah reviewed backup flight paths and emergency landing spots in case weather forced her to change her plan. The meteorologist warned that visibility could drop to dangerous levels in the mountain valleys, requiring her to rely heavily on instruments and her knowledge of terrain. As takeoff approached, Sarah completed her personal preparations with the same careful methods she used for aircraft systems. She reviewed emergency procedures one last time, checked her survival gear, and made sure her flight suit and protective equipment fit properly. Her calm attitude impressed the ground crew, who'd seen many pilots show nerves before dangerous missions. The modified spy plane sat on the flight line like a hunting bird ready to strike. Its sleek shape and powerful engine promised outstanding performance, but Sarah knew the aircraft's abilities meant nothing without skilled piloting and careful tactical execution. She did a final walk-around inspection, paying special attention to control surfaces and engine parts that would be crucial for low-altitude maneuvering. Colonel Henderson arrived at the flight line to offer final encouragement and official approval for the mission. His earlier doubt had changed to genuine confidence in Sarah's abilities, and he wanted her to know she had full support from base command. The colonel's presence drew attention from other personnel, who'd gathered to watch the departure of what many considered the most dangerous mission attempted from their base in recent years. Sarah climbed into the cockpit with practiced ease, her movements smooth and confident despite the pressure. She ran through her pre-start checklist with mechanical precision, each action performed exactly as she'd done thousands of times before. The familiar routine helped calm her nerves and focus her mind on the technical parts of the flight, rather than the dangers ahead. The engine startup went flawlessly, and Sarah felt the aircraft respond to her controls with the sensitivity she'd hoped for. The modified design had changed some of the plane's handling, but her thorough preparation let her adapt quickly to these differences. She briefly tested all flight controls and navigation systems, confirming everything worked within acceptable range. Ground control cleared her for immediate takeoff, and Sarah taxied toward the runway with steady confidence. She could see personnel lined up along the flight line watching her leave, their faces mixing admiration with concern for her safety. Captain Morrison stood near the control tower, monitoring radio communications and coordinating with the ground rescue team that would soon begin their own dangerous trip toward the crash site. As Sarah lined up with the runway, she took a deep breath and focused on the mission ahead. 4 people were counting on her skill and courage to bring them home, and she was determined not to fail them. The engine roared to full power as she released the brakes and began her takeoff roll, the aircraft speeding up rapidly as it gathered momentum for flight. The plane lifted smoothly and climbed into the uncertain sky, carrying Sarah toward her destiny and the most challenging test of her flying career. The first half hour took Sarah through relatively safe airspace, but as she neared hostile territory, every part of the mission became far more dangerous. She dropped to extremely low altitude, skimming just above treetops and using natural terrain to dodge enemy radar. The modified aircraft handled beautifully, but flying this low required constant attention and instant reactions to avoid obstacles. Mountain peaks emerged from the morning mist like ancient guards protecting the hostile land beyond. Sarah navigated through narrow passes and deep valleys, her aircraft threading between rocky outcrops with precision that would have impressed even the most skilled test pilot. The challenging terrain demanded every bit of her skill and focus, while knowing enemy forces were actively hunting for intruders added mental pressure to an already demanding flight. Radio contact with base became spotty as mountains blocked signal transmission. Sarah kept strict radio discipline, using brief coded messages to report her progress and get updates about enemy activity in the target area. Intelligence reports said insurgent forces had heard aircraft noise and were moving more anti-aircraft weapons towards suspected flight paths. Weather got worse as predicted, with low clouds cutting visibility and gusty crosswinds, making precise navigation extremely hard. Sarah relied heavily on her instrument training and knowledge of terrain to stay on her planned route while avoiding detection. Several times she made quick course changes to dodge cloud formations that would have exposed her aircraft to ground observers. Fuel consumption matched her calculations, but Sarah knew she had very little room for error or extra flight time in the target area. Every minute searching for the crash site would eat into her fuel reserves and increase the risk of being unable to return safely to base. The pressure to find the survivors quickly while keeping tactical advantage created a complex balance that tested her judgment and flying skill. As she approached the general area where the helicopter crashed, Sarah began her systematic search pattern, flying at dangerously low altitude. She scanned the dense forest for signs of wreckage, while listening carefully for radio signals from the survivors. The terrain was even tougher than satellite photos suggested, with steep ridges and narrow valleys creating a maze of potential hiding spots. Enemy ground fire suddenly erupted from a hidden position, tracer rounds streaking past her aircraft like deadly fireworks. Sarah's training kicked in immediately as she pulled evasive maneuvers that pushed both her plane and her body to their limits. The modified spy plane responded to her desperate controls with remarkable agility, letting her escape immediate danger while continuing her search mission. The close call with enemy fire made Sarah painfully aware that time was running out for both her and the trapped survivors. She adjusted her search pattern to focus on the most likely crash locations while avoiding areas where enemies had revealed their position. The mix of hostile fire, worsening weather, and fuel limits created a situation requiring perfect execution of every tactical choice. Radio contact with the survivors finally crackled through her headphones, weak but unmistakable. The downed crew had managed to fix their emergency radio and were trying to guide her toward their location using coded references to terrain they could see from their hiding place. Sarah felt a wave of relief and determination as she realized the rescue was still possible despite all the challenges she'd faced. Following the survivors' radio directions, Sarah spotted reflections from wreckage scattered across a small clearing surrounded by dense forest. The crash site sat in an extremely difficult position, accessible only through a narrow valley that would expose her aircraft to enemy observation and potential fire. She'd need to coordinate carefully with the ground rescue team while providing aerial reconnaissance of enemy positions around the crash site. Sarah circled the area at minimum height, using her aircraft's advanced sensors to identify enemy positions and safe approach routes for the rescue team. She kept constant radio communication with both the survivors and Captain Morrison's ground unit, providing critical intelligence that would determine success or failure of the entire rescue. Despite the extreme danger and pressure, her voice stayed calm and professional as she coordinated the complex tactical situation. The sound of approaching enemy helicopters forced Sarah to make an immediate choice about whether to fight the hostile aircraft or focus on protecting the rescue operation. Her training and instincts told her that the ground team's survival depended on her ability to provide accurate intelligence and tactical support rather than getting into aerial combat, which her spy plane wasn't designed for. With fuel running critically low and enemy forces closing in from multiple directions, Sarah faced the most crucial moments of the entire mission. Sarah's quick thinking and outstanding flying became the deciding factors in the rescue's success. As enemy helicopters approached the crash site, She used her deep knowledge of terrain to guide Captain Morrison's ground team through hidden approach routes that avoided hostile eyes. Her aerial reconnaissance revealed enemy positions that ground intelligence had missed, letting the rescue team neutralize threats before they could endanger the trapped survivor. The coordination between Sarah's aircraft and the ground rescue team showed the highest level of military teamwork under extreme pressure. She gave continuous updates about enemy movements while keeping her aircraft in tactical positions that maximized her ability to observe the battlefield without taking unnecessary risks. Her calm radio communications kept both teams informed and organized, despite the chaos of the hostile environment. Captain Morrison later credited Sarah's tactical awareness with preventing what could have been a disastrous ambush of his rescue team. Her ability to spot hidden enemy positions from her aerial view let the ground team approach the crash site safely and secure the area for survivor extraction. The success of the coordinated operation proved the value of having a skilled pilot who understood both aviation and ground combat tactics. The actual extraction of the 4 survivors went more smoothly than anyone dared hope. Sarah's precise navigation had led the rescue team to the exact crash location, where they found the crew injured but alive and ready for immediate evacuation. Her fuel situation had become critical, but she stayed in the area long enough to make sure the rescue team and survivors were safely moving toward the pickup point. The return flight to base tested Sarah's aircraft handling to absolute limits as she nursed her fuel-starved plane through the same dangerous terrain she'd navigated earlier. Weather had worsened during the rescue, with heavy clouds and strong winds creating extra challenges for her already difficult flight. Her thorough understanding of aircraft systems and performance limits proved crucial as she managed fuel use and engine performance to stretch her range. Radio communications with base control revealed the anxiety personnel had felt during her extended absence in hostile territory. Colonel Henderson personally monitored her return flight, coordinating with air traffic control to ensure priority handling and emergency services standing by in case her aircraft had mechanical problems. The entire base community had followed the rescue through radio reports and eagerly awaited her safe return. Sarah's aircraft appeared on base radar exactly when her fuel calculations predicted, showing the precision and professional skill that made her mission successful. She executed a perfect approach and landing despite her exhaustion and stress from the dangerous mission. Ground crews rushed to service her aircraft, while medical personnel prepared to treat any injuries she might have gotten during the hostile fire encounter. The debriefing revealed the full scope of Sarah's achievements during the rescue. Intelligence analysts were amazed by how accurate her tactical observations were and the quality of information she'd provided about enemy positions and capability. Captain Morrison praised her coordination skills and credited her aerial reconnaissance with making the ground rescue possible under such dangerous conditions. Media attention put a national spotlight on Sarah's role in the successful rescue, but she stayed characteristically modest about her contribution. In interviews, she consistently emphasized the teamwork involved and credited the ground rescue team with the dangerous job of actually pulling the survivors from hostile territory. Her humility and professionalism impressed senior military leaders who recognized her potential for future leadership roles. The 4 rescued crew members made complete recoveries from their injuries and personally thanked Sarah for her courage and skill in coordinating their rescue. Their families wrote letters expressing gratitude for her willingness to risk her life to bring their loved ones home safely. These personal connections reminded Sarah why she'd chosen military service and strengthened her commitment to protecting fellow service members. Sarah's successful completion of the rescue opened new opportunities for her military career and established her reputation as one of the Navy's most capable combat pilots. She received awards for her tactical skills, flying ability, and leadership under pressure. But more importantly, she'd proven to herself and others that gender was irrelevant when it came to military competence and courage. The quiet lieutenant who stood up when Captain Morrison asked for a combat pilot had become a symbol of determination, skill, and selfless service that inspired other women in the military to chase their own ambitious goals, despite whatever challenges they might face.